Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill, like button, subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, that's AMPIRE. Also, while you're there, check out Between the Hashes. It's my son Matthew's weekly look at the big college football games of the week. Comes out every Friday. So give that a view, a listen, a like, a subscribe, all that good stuff. Well, actually, you're subscribing to Empire Media, so you'll already be there, but check out Between the Hashes. There's also All's Caps, AOZ Caps. That's with former Washington Capitals defenseman Carl Alsner and AP hockey writer Steve Wino. Good information on the Washington Capitals. Today, I'm joined by the Athletics' Mike Jones, who, of course, used to cover the Washington franchise, then the Redskins, now the Commanders, and he's now with the Athletic as a national football reporter. I wanted to bring him on to talk about the sale, the potential sale, his thoughts on all that, what he's hearing around the league, all that good stuff. We get into some really good stuff. We also talk a little bit about the Eagles since Washington plays them on Monday night. That's kind of an insight into the Eagles. And then a little bit of some of the things going on here with Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, some thoughts on that and the direction of this franchise and where he thinks they're at besides just a 4-5 record. But one thing we did not get into is all the stuff that happened after the interview, because we taped that on Wednesday morning, and then subsequently the Attorney General's office, DC Attorney General's office, released a statement about a press conference on Thursday at 1:00. So if you're listening to this, you may already know what was in the press conference. Check out ESPN.com for further information of the story. I'm sure, social media. Check out my Twitter handle. My colleague Tisha Thompson will be covering the press conference. Anyway, Mike and I taped it before that, and then that's important because the Attorney General's office said they're going to make a major announcement regarding their investigation into the Commanders. But then what it also led to is more statements by this organization, and one of which went viral in a horrible way for the organization, and it was a terrible, terrible look. So their statement referenced running back Brian Robinson, without by name, but certainly by what happened to him with the shooting in D.C., and basically saying the Attorney General's office should be more worried about things like that than this investigation, in essence. Well, I can tell you, not everybody in that organization was very happy with that statement. I don't think, I know that I've never seen a statement that they've released that has gone viral in this way. The number and the outrage that it led to. It was unprecedented to me. Now, clearly, there's been a lot of outrage about this organization over the last several years, and longer for some, but certainly over the last couple of years. But as far as a statement, I've never seen anything like this. Again, universal outrage over how they portrayed this and trying to use the situation with Robinson to either garner support or to deflect or to whatever it is they wanted to do. Anyway, what I know is that there are multiple people in that organization who were not happy about what was released. I don't know who ultimately was the decider for this statement. I know that the way it typically goes, Dan Snyder has a chief communications officer, Jean Medina. She reports directly to Dan. So clearly those two would have been involved. And then there would have been Jason Wright released a statement later in the night and referenced their external lawyer, which would be John Brownlee. So it could have been those three involved in it. That would be a guess, but that's just a guess. I don't know who ultimately either authored it, okayed it, whatever, who quote unquote ordered the code red, as Jack Nicholson once said. But that's what I can tell you. What I also know is that Jason Wright put out a statement of his own later in the night. And he talked about the efforts by the DC police to in the Brian Robinson shooting. But he also said at the end, the lawyers, and he's talking about Brownlee in the statement, the lawyers' legitimate frustrations with the AG should have been separate and apart from referencing the terrible crime that affected our player. End of quote, end of statement. And that's what needed to be said. And he probably could have gone harder, but I'll be honest, that's basically a rebutting their own statement or saying that it was wrong or bad without saying that. So anyway, an unusual night, even for the Commanders. And here, that's where we're at. The other thing what that statement did is the original one was created an unnecessary distraction for a team that is coming off a tough loss and needs to go up to play maybe the best team in the NFL in the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday. But on Thursday, what they'll get are a lot of questions about Brian Robinson in that statement. Now, you can diffuse it, and Robinson can diffuse it by saying he doesn't want to talk about it. That's fine. His agent talked about it, and his agent was livid about it. You can go check out his comments on social media. His name is Ryan Williams. That's also in the story I wrote for ESPN.com. You can see that. You can go to my Twitter feed at John_Keim. The quote or the tweet will be there. But again, he was livid, and I don't believe that anybody talked to Brian Robinson before this came out. And again, agent was pissed, and you don't typically see a lot of things like this. And even the agent said that prior to that everything they had done with him had been very, very good. So, and I'm sure that there were conversations between higher ups, maybe even Ron Rivera and the agent, and probably Brian Robinson, but I don't know that for sure. But that's just typically how these things go. But again, so you have Ron Rivera coming back off his mom's funeral. That was on Tuesday. And on the first day back, he's got to deal with another situation like this that was created by the team. If it's just about a press conference by the AG's office, depending on what was said, probably doesn't have to answer too much. He can just say, that's separate from me. But in a situation like this, it does involve his player, and you wonder about how that affects the player, et cetera. So it will be up. You may not like it being a topic, but unfortunately, they created the topic. And so that's where we're at. Anyway, just an unnecessary situation, and that's where we go. But having said all that, now let's turn to a little bit on the field for 1 minute regarding Chase Young and Jahan Dotson. With Chase Young, clearly he's going to practice this week. There was concerns, or they wanted to make sure his conditioning was up to par before they play him. They also want to make sure his technique is right and not as rusty as they said last week before they play him. I don't know if that means he'll play Monday, but I know there's a chance, certainly a good chance of that happening, but we may not know until Sunday if Young will be available. And it's funny because sometimes I get like, oh, they shouldn't rush him back. They're not rushing him back. This has been a year. So they have taken their time because they want to make sure that when he gets back out there, he can play and play the way he needs to. It's going to take time. And if he has a slow start, it doesn't mean he's hurt still. It just means he needs to get back into it. And that does take time when you've missed that much football and you're coming off that kind of an injury. With Jahan Dotson, there's optimism. Last week on Friday, Scott Turner said that he felt Dotson would play this week. We'll see. Those hamstring issues can be very tricky. So I would say take it day by day. There's optimism. There was optimism last time, and then he tweaked his hamstring on a route. So we'll see what there. But I think, like I said, there is optimism, and that's where we stand. Anyway, that's it from me. So let's get to my conversation with the Athletics' Mike Jones. Again, it was taped before all the stuff that came out later in the day. So that's why we don't talk about it. But there's a lot of other stuff to get into, especially with the sale of the team. And I think that's where the focus needs to be because that affects this franchise going forward. So here we go. Mike, before we get going, people need to be updated where you're at now. You bounced around a couple times now. You were UCLA, you're the Washington Post. Now, you're now at the Athletics. So tell people where they can get you and what they can do to find your good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm let's see, I guess this is November. I guess I've been here about a month, a little bit more than a month now at the Athletic. Still covering the NFL from a national perspective. It's different because, it's a much bigger team where you have, 1 and 2 beat writers assigned to every single team. And so I still have my fingers in a lot of stuff and just figuring out my lane, but doing big picture things and analysis and commentary. But yeah, so I'm still on Twitter at by Mike Jones. When I went to USA Today, I switched that handle. I was like, okay, by Mike Jones, no matter where I'm working, I won't have to keep changing it. And who knows if Twitter will be around very much longer. But yeah, still on Twitter, and then at the Athletic, you can go there and find all my stuff. Yeah, so
but we didn't get the why I joined the Athletic story.
Oh, the why I joined the Athletic. I'd been at USA Today for a little while. It was 5 years. The Athletic reached out to me. And it was funny because the managing editor, I knew a number of people there, but the managing editor Dan Uthman was covering high school sports in out near Winchester area. Was
Yeah.
it Warren County
Yep.
or Frederick County or whatever?
Frederick County.
When I started covering high school sports in my hometown in Fauquier County, around the same time. So we kind of knew each other, but didn't, never worked together. And he was at the Washington Post and left just before I got there. And he was at USA Today and left before I got there. And so he said he'd always had his eye on me. And he was familiar with my work. And now my direct supervisor, Allison, she was at the Loudon Extra, which the Washington Post used to put out. I was like a local little paper. And so she was familiar with my work back from my high school days. And so it was kind of all came together. They had a great opportunity. It was a new challenge, something fresh, another opportunity to step up a little bit. And so I like the way that the Athletic, they have the mission statement of digging deeper. They give you time to work on stuff and go just beyond box scores and the surface. And so that's what everybody tries to do there. It's a great network, great support system. I'm really liking it so far.
But I was kind of laughing though, because it used to be we had those 2 years where you see every other tweet was, why join the Athletic? So,
Right.
and now, you did write something a little bit when you did it, but it's also a lesson for people listening. My parental lesson is that your work always matters, no matter what level you're at. Because when Mike was covering Warrenton, the same approach that he used then is what he's taking now. So
Right.
that's why you get noticed, and people notice you there and they pay attention to you throughout the years, and your work doesn't change, the work ethic doesn't change. And then when they're in position to hire you, they do it because they remember you. So it always matters. That's my little lesson for all you folks out there. So anyway, Mike, let's get to the good stuff. All right, a week or so ago, kind of a bombshell here with the sale stuff. First of all, how shocked were you when you saw the statement from the Snyders?
I was very shocked by this statement. The news that they were looking into buyers wasn't as much of a surprise, but then when they put out a statement, it didn't because they always, over how many years, when there's a report, either first try to put out something positive, some type of spin ahead of time, or they will discredit whatever that report is, even if the report's true. But they did not discredit. And it was like, whoa, they're admitting that now they said we're reviewing all options. But I was like, okay, this is one or two things. Is this really about to happen? He's going to sell this thing. Or I had heard, you probably had heard, that they're cash strapped. And, that part of the reason why Rivera might, even if they don't turn around, might be here another year is because word around the league is that they don't have the money to pay him and another coaching staff. And so I was like, maybe, that in the stadium, they need more money. So maybe they're going to sell off a couple shares, bring in some people so they have some money to put towards the stadium. But this is big. And then as time went on, like that, this really is them, finally taking the nudge, it seems, and preparing to get out. It's something that every day that you hear a little something and you're just like, wow,
he's
finally doing it. This is more shocking than the name change to me.
I agree.
It said never in all caps, and you can quote that, but money talks. And then they had just put out that statement after the Irsay comments at the owners' meeting saying that they weren't going to, and that again, I can't even finish my sentences. It's that shocking still that he's finally throwing in the towel.
But you said you weren't surprised. Why not? I mean, there was all the stuff going on, but there was still very adamant about never selling. And is it just because? And I'm sorry to interrupt you. For people. I'll give them a chance in a second. Hold on. But with the whole, you brought the cash strap thing too, which that's been something that has been whispered about for a long time. So was that the reason, or was there something else?
No, it was because, look, Irsay went out there and spoke, and nobody else did. But these owners, the one thing I will agree with Daniel Snyder is these owners, the way they operated is like the mafia. Okay. There's a lot of behind the scenes discussions, behind the scenes plotting and everything. And I do not for a second think that Jim Irsay walked out there and just randomly spoke on his own just on a whim, because here's the scene. So it's a hotel lobby. We're just off of the lobby. There's a velvet rope that us reporters have to stand behind, and the owners walk through the lobby and they go up these stairs to go to the meetings. And a session was going on. And owners had been coming and going, but they, just a little hello or whatever, not really talking. Irsay comes across the lobby like he's going back to the meetings in the middle of a time when we knew that there was a session. So it's kind of like, what's he out for? But he comes and he goes by he walks with these kind of almost like ski poles, these kind of like canes, I guess, to support him a little bit. And he comes up to the banister of the stairs and he hands his ski poles. I'm sorry, I don't know what else you call them, but they look like that. He hands them to an assistant, and it's like he camps out, like, oh, this guy's going to talk for a little while. Is like he wanted to talk, and he's discussing kind of the scene in the room, and then he says yes, and there's a lot of difficult discussions. And someone said, difficult? Well, is Dan Snyder, the ownership, part of that? And he goes and pontificates for 14 minutes about this. And then eventually he goes upstairs, and nobody else wanted to stop and talk. And it was just very odd. So the fact that he said that and did that, and Roger Goodell saying he wasn't at all surprised that Irsay had those feelings, made me know that, okay, people are talking about this. And Irsay said that he hoped that by the spring meetings in March, that they would be in a position to be able to vote. So that meant that, and he said he believed that they had the votes. Now, no vote had been taken, but it just let me know that the discussions behind the scenes were ongoing, and that I did know that there were whispers that they would much rather, and I think it had been reported, that they would much rather him just go ahead and sell the thing and not have it get to a vote. And so I imagined that there was going to be pressure applied. I did not think that this pressure was going to just hit like that right now. I thought maybe closer to like just before, maybe after the season, as we're heading towards those owners meetings in March, that then maybe some word would leak out that Jerry had gotten his ear, or somebody had been like, okay, Roger had stepped in saying, you need to go ahead and move with this. So the timing was very surprising, but the fact that there had been some nudging to get him to go ahead and do that is not surprising to me. But the fact that just that quickly after Irsay talking really let me know that, okay, yeah, there has been pressure, there has been discussions, and this thing is moving along.
Do you think there's any chance it's just a limited partnership that would come in? Do you think anybody would do that? Or do you think this is just listen, all the momentum looks like a full sale, but do you think it's absolutely a full sale, or could it still be a limited partnership sort of situation?
I guess you never say never, but it definitely seems like this is a full sale. When it first happened, the question, when I asked around, somebody said, well, you don't know, if he's trying to bring in partners. But ever since then, when I check in with people, there's not a whole lot of information, but the sense is that this is a full sale. And we see a number of ownership groups lining up and things like that. So that also tells me it's not people saying, hey, I'd like to buy in. The only person who said I'd like to buy in is RG3. And I think he was saying that, jokingly, but you never know with that guy. But nobody else has been kind of saying, I'm interested in buying in. Everything we hear is this group is interested in buying in this group. So that lets me know that, again,
Denver Bronco heavy hitter groups too, right? I mean, in some cases,
credible people who have had discussions with the league and have been in this process, that lets me know that they made some behind the scenes phone calls to say, hey, what is this? And what are the opportunities? And okay, now let me start lining stuff up because I am interested. So that's why I do think that it is full sale and not just looking for some reinforcements.
So there's a realist. The quickest it could happen would be by March, correct? I mean, that's almost like that would be the fast, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because that's when the owners would have to vote on it. And that would be it. But that would be a fast sale, right? And is that possible?
I do think that it's possible. I don't think there's any way it's faster than that. I'm trying to remember what the timeline was when They sold the Panthers. The Broncos thing went on for a while. The Panthers was not as long.
Raptors was
Was
quicker. He
Yeah,
went, I think it was December, mid to late December, he announced it. And I
right.
thought they were approved in the spring.
Right. Yeah. See, that's what, so that's why March makes a lot of sense, because this is a little bit longer than that, because here we are. The wheels started in October. Here we are in November. And again, that's when they'll have their meeting. They always could have another special meeting, but it makes sense that that would be there. That gives everybody time to get their ducks in a row and have their pitches, and then the voting on that. So I don't think before then. After then, it's possible, but that seems like the sweet
Right.
spot, March.
How do you think situation is viewed? And it's hard without talking to a Jeff Bezos, who's in one of the names, Matt Ishbia, one of the names, but when you talk to the people around the league, how do they view this situation as a purchase and what could happen here with new ownership?
I think, and again, I have not talked to any prospective owners.
Right.
Just talked to some people in the league who hear different, things. That I think that they look at this saying like, okay, look, this franchise is very valuable despite all of the ridiculousness that has gone on, and the attendance has not been great and everything. If we can turn and whip this thing around, it has the real potential. They know that the fan base is hungry for a change. That there's fans that have gone away and are staying away that will likely come back once there is, new ownership and a fresh approach. So I think that people kind of see this as a reclamation project, that, when you look at this house and you're like, okay, it's got a good structure. You got to fix this, got to fix that, but there's not a whole lot. If we put this amount into it, the value is going to jump. I think that they look at it like that, where, okay, this is still one of the long storied franchises in the NFL. It has been in a bad way for a long time now, but if we're smart about this, it's not going to take us a whole lot to turn this thing around. And we know that this location, this fan base, likes to support a football team if they're about winning. And so I feel like that's why you've seen a number of ownership groups, because there's a good amount of interest.
Yeah, and I think this is a gold mine for someone to come into, because they own right now, they own the stadium. You're going to get a new stadium. With the new stadium, you can build around there and develop all that the Snyders wanted to do. So you have a way to increase your money like that. The NFL is only going up, and I think because, like you said, like part of the problem here has been ownership and people rebelling against it, and and the tearing down of what had been an iconic franchise, right? So it just feels like it's ripe to shoot up high with the right ownership. So if you remember, like when Dan Snyder came in, there were people who were excited because he's young and brash and aggressive. So you never know what you get, but we know, people know what it's been like too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there you go.
They figure, okay, it can't get much worse.
No, and we both hear from a lot of fans who would welcome that change quite a bit. And I talked to Chris Russell, who was saying that people were calling them on the air and in tears with joy at the possibility of this. And I remember, like, as I'm a Cleveland guy, when LeBron James came back, that's how people reacted. It was as if the Cavs won a title that day that he announced. They were so happy. And like that's what some of that feeling will be. But I also think that people are going to, until it happens, they're going to say like, well, you're never going to, you don't want to get that ball pulled away from you. So anyway, but is there anything else to add on that, you think?
No, I just agree with you. I just think that, this franchise, these fans have suffered for so long. They've seen so many different approaches. They've seen a million different coaches, a million different quarterbacks. You've seen a lot of spending. You've seen frugal approaches, and none of it has worked. And all of it is traced back to this guy with his, just awful and embarrassing behavior. And so, there's a sadness that's been going on for a long time by people who feel like, I love this team, but I can't support it. So if there's new ownership, I mean, look, it's going to take time. They're not going to just be winners in year one. That ownership has to come in and show that they can connect with the community. They also have to show they can put the right football people in place. So it's going to take time, but just the hope, this thing has not gone through yet. But the fact that there is a possibility has just given people around DC a degree of optimism that, hey, maybe this thing is going to turn around. And I think that prospective owners see that, and that's what fuels their optimism to want to buy in to this here.
And let's switch to the football side because that's important too here. And I want just a few minutes on this team and then the Eagles a few minutes as well. So, and by the way, one thing that people need to do when you talk about the Athletic, your observation stuff is always a good stuff. So that's one of the benefits of reading, Mike, is getting those observations from the games throughout the week, et cetera. So there you go. But with this team, how do you think they are viewed, especially because this is Ron Rivera's third year? There are obviously a lot of questions. How are they viewed outside of around the league?
When I talked to people as they were entering the season about where they were, I think that this is about what people expected. There was skepticism about Carson Wentz because, look, he has not looked like that MVP candidate guy from 2017 in a long time. He wasn't awful in Indianapolis, but there were people who felt like, okay, you know what? He was solid. He'll still be an upgrade over what they had.
Right. Which I thought they would be. Yeah.
But a lot of, when I asked around, felt like, this roster really has not improved in a whole lot of areas since Ron Rivera took it over. Maybe here and there, wide receiver group is stronger. The defensive front is stronger, but as a whole, it's not dramatically better. And so, I don't see anybody, haven't hawked anybody who felt like they were going to be really competitive this year. They felt like they might be, around 500, a little bit better, possibly if everything went right. And you're thinking, okay, if they can help Carson Wentz get back to what he was, if this defensive front can be what they have the potential to be with all those first round picks, then yeah, maybe this team could, be in that, just above 500 range. But, they've had injuries. There have been, struggles and everything like that. So them hovering right around 500 is probably the accurate, thing here. There's nobody that I talk to, it feels like they're going to flip a switch down the second half of the season. There will be, weeks where they lose tough games, just like we saw on Sunday. There will be a couple weeks where maybe they win one they shouldn't have, and then there's going to be some where they lose ugly. They're just a middling team right now because there's just, there hasn't been consistency along the line. There hasn't been consistency at quarterback. And so
both those spots, it comes back to that, man.
Right. It does. You got to win in the trenches. You got to have good quarterback play. And you can duct tape some stuff together and, steal a win here or there. But when it really comes down to it, the teams that are at the best are the teams with really good line play and good quarterback play.
And, it's funny because before the season, I had a few of the beat reporters on, and I think most of us fell in that they could win, and they were in that 7 to 10 win range.
Right.
And if it all goes well, it's 10 wins. And if you got a few issues, it's going to be 7 wins. And I think they're on pace to being right in that category. I think what's happened is some other teams in the division are a lot better than people thought it would be. So it exacerbates what's going on here. And I think that's kind of a problem as well. What do you do with, and I don't know how much you're talking to people about Taylor Heineke or anything like that, but I'm curious what you would hear from people about him and what you think might happen going forward with him.
Well, I have heard from people who feel like, man, like they really messed up trading for Carson Wentz because, the numbers aren't that much different. And look, last year, even Wentz and Heineke's numbers, I think they had similar touchdown totals. The difference was the interceptions. Heineke had more interceptions.
Wentz had like 27-7. Taylor was 20-15. Different situations. So
right, different situations, right? But I mean, as far as like, it wasn't dramatically like you're getting a guy who threw for 45 touchdown passes, and whatever. But when you look at the numbers this year, I think the offense was averaging like 17 points a game under Wentz, and it's 19, in Heineke's, last 3. Yardage is very similar right here. A lot of people feel that I've talked to do feel like they messed up, and that the biggest thing, yeah, you look at Heineke, he's limited. You see, in the pocket is where you really see it, where he
Yeah.
can't step up and make those throws. But the big thing was that the fact that they took on, not only did they give up the three draft picks, was the second and a third and a conditional, but taking on that $28 million in salary cap, was really something that it's like, man, they would have been better off rolling with Heineke and, Sam Howell and using those picks and that money for other needs. And now they're going to have to go and again figure out what they got to do at the quarterback position, because the answer, Wentz does not look like, that is it. And Heineke, obviously, great spark plug, for a little bit, but eventually turns back into a pumpkin. So it's almost like another lost season at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and in all full confession, I was one of the ones that said, well, he's going to be an upgrade if nothing else.
Right, I did
And
too.
so it's
Yeah,
hard because, but in hindsight, I mean, it's
I
here's what I say in hindsight, they needed to do a better job upgrading that offensive line and replacing what they lost. And they
right.
didn't do that. And so if you had,
That was a
however you
good
invest in
point.
that,
That was another point. Somebody said to me, you should have saved that money and kept Flowers for your offensive line rather than give it to him, because look, I don't know if he was, but he was solid.
he was
At,
solid.
you
He was
know,
solid.
and now you see that line is there's issues there, and so yeah, those resources could have been allocated a little bit better. And I thought, hey, you know he's bigger, he's more athletic. Maybe he just needs to be somewhere where he knows he's really
Right.
wanted. Maybe they can help him. And he talked a good talk, but he's just not as aggressive as they need him to be. And Heineke is that, but he's just limited, skill wise.
And it's funny because like with Heineke is still he's not a finished product.
Right,
He's never going to be at maybe a certain level because the ceiling isn't as high, and everybody's going to talk about it. We'll say the same thing, but he's not a finished product because he can still learn things. He's only started 19 games in the NFL,
right,
and then with Wentz is coming into a new offensive situation, so he's learning a new offense. So in fairness to him,
right.
there's also you can get better as well in this offense. The hard part is again, will you get the consistent protection to be able to do that? And are you being put in the right situations to maximize your potential?
Right. Which
That's
is
the
why, you know, there was, Frank Reich didn't want to get rid of him because he thought, hey, a second year, maybe
right.
we can help him take a leap. But again, when you're starting all over, you're learning new terminology.
It's
Not
not
able to play fast as you were. It's not second nature. You're thinking a lot. And I think that gets, underestimated. People don't think about that, just saying stuff a different way and knowing, where your protections are and, everything and all that stuff. It is a lot that goes into it, but they needed him to be better.
And then, so let's switch to the Eagles too now, because these guys play Monday. I only want to keep a couple of minutes. Always appreciate your time. Kept you on too long. People will like it, but I know it's, you got time to do. So let's get this. How good are the Eagles and how surprised are you by what we know they're good, but how surprised are you by what they've done so far?
Yeah, I am surprised. There were some people who were talking, hey, maybe Super Bowl contenders or whatever before the season. I was like, okay, look, that's a little bit strong.
Yeah.
But hey, they really have done a very good job of retooling. They didn't strip this thing down and go through a 5-year rebuild
No.
process. The culture change did not take that long. But what they did understand is, okay, we got a quarterback that we believe in. Now let's give him the tools to help elevate him. And that's what we've seen with a lot of young quarterbacks this year, whether it's him, whether it's Tua, is okay, we're not going to put too much on him. Yes, he's our guy. He's the stir that stirs the drink, but they got him AJ Brown, which was fantastic to go with Devontae Smith. They've got a good, a decent running game. Their defense is really good. So I am very surprised at the leap that Jalen Hurts
Right.
took. I thought he would improve. Didn't think they would be, no way in the world. I thought they'd be undefeated right now. And just the way that everything is clicking on both sides of the ball. When I ask around, people say they are indeed one of the most complete teams in the league
Yeah.
and probably the most complete team in the NFC. Now, will that translate to, them, winning, the NFC? I don't know. Once we get to the postseason, some things change. They have been there before. Last year, they got a taste. So it's going to be interesting to see. The NFC is down. There's quality teams, but there's some teams, a lot of them, you got questions about. Like even the Vikings, I don't find them very convincing for whatever reason. You know,
This
the
team had him.
you know, Cowboys got some, some questions about them as well. Obviously the Bucks are not the Bucks that we knew. The Packers are, a disaster. The Rams, bad shape. San Francisco, they look like they're going to be trending the right way. So if a full force San Francisco and the Eagles team, that should be a really competitive, but I don't know how it plays out, who wins that thing if it's, a playoff matchup.
And I want to look at the Eagles roster construction because that's been part of the issue here is roster construction. And when you look at it, their line is really good.
Right.
And the funny thing is, like with Jalen Hurts, it also feels like while they believed in him, maybe they weren't quite sure if they should be sold on him. But what they did do is they gave him a chance, say, okay, we're going to give you all this stuff around you. Go do it, or we'll have. But then what I also loved about what they did is they set themselves up for the future. So if Jalen Hurts doesn't do well, they got extra picks to go up and get another guy. I think it was just smart management.
Yeah, exactly. Because, hey, this is a young guy. He may or may not, regardless of who our quarterback is, you got to be able to protect him. You got to have a strong defensive line, a strong defense, back him. So again, we talked about it. Hey, quarterbacks and wide receivers are sexy, but the line play on both sides is big, and they really invested in both of that. And like you said, it is a good situation for any quarterback to step into, whether it was Jalen Hurts or whether it was a replacement next year.
So the last thing I want to leave you on, so we can end on a positive note for Washington fans. Terry McLaurin, what are your thoughts on him? I mean, that's open ended, but what are your thoughts?
Well, that was my biggest surprise, is that he did not become best friends with Carson Wentz, that Carson Wentz did not seem to look to him. And it's just like, what are you doing? And I had heard that, like, as far as like in the locker room and like they were doing things to build chemistry and everything. When I say best friends, just meant like on the field, he was a forgotten man so much. It has been great to see. That's the one great thing about Heineke is Heineke knows, hey, look for number 17. I think that's, the way they spread the ball around, Curtis Samuel gets his shots and stuff, but McLaurin, it was like, man, he just got paid and he's like the forgotten man. I'm happy for him that now it's like, okay, he's back to being the feature, the focus of the passing game like he should have been, because the guy is consistent, plays the game the right way. He's really talented and probably underrated, but you got to have opportunities. The quarterback's got to look your way. And I kind of wondered, like, why are they not placing a stronger emphasis on getting him the ball? Now, you see that's going on, and he's delivering like it looked like he could have before he got his payday.
He's been a nice story to cover, given where he started. I mean, he's a third-round pick with talent. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but nobody expected this. And it's also the humility he has shown throughout this. That has been he's very refreshing to cover, and that sounds as I'm describing a piece of gum or mint, but like he's a really refreshing guy to cover.
But also, look, you hear the saying, "Game recognizes game."
Yeah,
it speaks volumes that star players on other teams are whether it's Justin Jefferson or Kevin Durant or whatever, people recognize what he does and that he's legit. It's not just he's good because he's here and he's actually legit. It is, like you said, it's refreshing. It's been one of the few refreshing storylines that thank God for Terry McLaurin, because what else would you have to hang on to?
Oh my God, if they had lost him, there would have been crickets in that building on game day. So Mike, I appreciate your time, always informative. People got to check them out. Go do it. Get subscribed to The Athletic. It will not break your bank, and it'll be worth it. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Cakes.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Mike for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back this weekend, I believe on Sunday, probably Sunday morning, with my keys and predictions for the game for Monday night's contest at Philadelphia. We'll talk to you next time.